Welcome to the Business Women Australia podcast show, the podcast that brings together industry leaders to discuss the latest trends, insights, and strategies. So sit back and relax. Let's get inspired by the amazing women who are shaping the future of professional women in Australia. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Welcome everyone to the Business Women Australia podcast show. Our show today is investment strategies for executive women, and I have got an amazing and knowledgeable guest with me today. So my guest today is a finance advocate for women, securing as the Women in Finance Chair for the FAAWA, and where she's also a mentor. And with over 2 decades, we're not showing our ages here, but we'll keep it to over 2 decades in the finance industry. Katie is a proud director of the Private Wealth Architects, where she works with professional families, family groups, business owners, women, and private families. So a very warm welcome, Katie McDonald.
Hi, Leanne. How are you?
I am great today. How are you?
Very good. Yeah, actually not. I've got a bit of a cold, but I'm sure we'll get through this.
And you're present, and this is what we love.
Exactly.
And we're going to kick it off today because, you've come forward, and when we prepare for a podcast, I usually get, a little bit of information, and you've given me a wealth of information about superannuation, women's contributions, and, some of these executive strategies. So we're going to dive right into it because, like I said, there is a lot of information here. And But we're going to start really quite simple as, why do you think women actually make excellent investors?
I know it's so interesting because when I start with this discussion in my workshops and with clients, they're amazed that this is a true statistic. Women make fantastic investors, one, because quite frankly, we are smarter. We outperform men at uni and also at school. So that just sets the scene for where we're starting. 68% of women are confident as a CFO in their household budgets. And according to research done by Fidelity over the last 10 years, so this is robust research, women actually outperform males' counterparts by 0.4% in investing. We're better at doing our homework and we're risk adverse. And when people ask, why would that be a good trait? Basically, what it means is we're going to actually look into the investments before making a decision, as opposed to sitting at the pub, talking to a mate who knows a mate who said, this is a really sure investment. That's not something women do. We prefer to actually learn about what we're going to do and then make a decision to do it. So all in all, not only are we just smarter, we actually do outperform the market in comparison to our male counterparts. And it all comes down to actually thinking about what we want to try and achieve, and then learning about how we're going to achieve that, and then actually taking action.
And this is such a great thing to hear because, we did go through one of the statistics that came up was previously women were at risk, a higher risk of homelessness over 50. So now we see these strengths coming through, and women are able to take more accountability over their finances is phenomenal. And not just that, we're taking that reach a little bit further now.
Yeah, I think so. I think basically we are still at risk of homelessness and at a greater risk than our male counterparts. And there's a number of reasons, and we'll probably go into those statistics later. But then if we look at this and go, okay, we make better investments, then if we start taking control of our financial future, then we will be less likely to be that statistic. Yeah.
So what do you think are the first steps that women should take when they start their investment journey?
So this is going to be really boring, but the first step is actually understand where you are now, okay? And so that's understanding your asset value. So adding up all the assets that you own and adding up all the liabilities that you have, and then minusing your assets from your liability to get your net asset position. And that becomes your starting point. And as you know, if you don't know where you are now, how are you going to get to where you want to go? So you really do need to know where you are now. The next step is to actually understand how much you're spending. So you do that by first understanding your net income, then working out how much you spend on a monthly, weekly, fortnightly basis, and then you should have surplus at the end. So first of all, we start with your net asset position. Then we look at your surplus, so understanding your net surplus, and then we work out where you want to go. Okay, so where do you want to buy a house? You want to pay off your debt? You want to go on holidays? You want to send your kids to private schools? You want to retire at 55? All of these different goals that everybody has. So you need to then know what they are and then put dollar figures to those goals. So we start again and we go, what is our net asset position? How much surplus we have? What goals we have? And then we go, okay, so for example, I want to retire at 55. How much money do I need in retirement or in investable assets to retire? And so then you have to put a dollar figure on a weekly, monthly, fortnightly basis towards that goal so that you can achieve it. Then it's only then that you look at the different investments that you need to use in order to actually make those goals a reality. And today what we're really going to talk about is property, shares, and super. And super is just a vehicle, and we will go into it. I feel that it's easier for people to actually think of it as three different assets when super really isn't the asset, it's a vehicle to hold your assets. But we're going to talk about then where do you invest and why would you invest in shares over property or super or property or shares? What is the actual, how do you work that out?
So that leads into the next question, like property versus the shares. Which one's better?
So
People want the easy answer here.
I actually probably am a little different to most investors because I like both. And I would say most advisors like the share market, and then most property investors like the property market. I started my investment journey in investment properties, and I love investment properties, but I also understand and love the share market. So neither one of them are actually better than the other. On average, if you look back over the last 20, 30, 40 years, they've roughly done the same amount of returns. They just have different ways of doing them. So if I looked at property as an example, I often explain it as a slow moving elephant. And what I mean by that is it doesn't go up and down every day. It actually just takes a long time to get to the top and then a long time to get to the bottom. So there's still a property cycle. It just takes longer than the share market to do that. And one of the reasons it takes that long is the cost to get in and the cost to get out. So if we looked at property and we said, okay, if we wanted to buy an investment property, it would have stamp duty attached to it. And so in turn, then you're not just buying the property, you're actually paying an additional cost with bank fees, stamp duty, and legal fees that add an extra roughly 5% on to the property you're purchasing. And then when you go to sell that property, it costs a lot to get out, and that includes agency fees and legal fees. So in turn, one of the reasons why property isn't as volatile as the share market is really that cost associated with property. If we then looked at the share market and its cost, you can buy a share for $30. So the cost to get in is a lot cheaper, and the cost to get out is a lot cheaper. And how does that relate to volatility and the comparison between a slow moving elephant and a crazy lunatic, which is the share market really? If you hear that Rio has just blown up a cave and you don't like that, you can just press a button and it costs you $30 and you're out of the market, okay? But with a property, if you hear that, I don't know, Australia is going into a recession, or if you lose your job, you're going to take a lot longer to make the decision about selling a property because of those expenses. And it also leads us to the next area, is how quick it is to get out of a property versus how quick it is to get out of the share market. So if we use that example again, and we've just heard that Rio is blowing up a cave, we literally can sell the shares and get the money. We can sell the shares within 3 seconds and we can get the money within 3 days.
Yeah.
Now, if you compare that to an investment property, the first thing we have to do is we have to probably do some repairs and maintenance on that property to get it up to scratch. We then have to find a real estate agent to sell that property. That real estate agent has to do some photos, market it, put it on the market. Then we have the open for inspection. Now, even if somebody makes an offer that day, we have to then negotiate that offer. And then it doesn't settle for at least another 6 weeks after that. So if we're going to make a decision with selling a property versus selling shares, the time frame of getting out of that property, or the opposite, getting into that property or shares, is significantly different. And that's one of the reasons why properties don't have that huge volatility of every second of every day in comparison to the share market, because you can make these decisions in the share market a lot quicker. So then you go, okay, I understand why the property market isn't as volatile as the share market. If they roughly go up the same amount, then what's the benefit, or which one would you choose? Okay. So when we then look at costs associated and leveraging to get into an investment property, if we want to buy a $500,000 investment property, and there are none of them available, so but I'm just using it for ease of math here. If we wanted to buy a $500,000 investment property, we would roughly have $100,000 for the deposit. Okay, that's 20%, which is roughly what people are wanting to do these days, or the banks do anyway. So we own an asset worth $500,000. But we only put $100,000 into that asset. If that asset goes up by 10%, we've made $50,000. So that leverage has allowed us to have a greater growth because we've leveraged into it. Now, most people don't leverage into the share market, and I'm not a fan of leveraging into the share market, mainly because of that volatility. So if you have $100,000, you put $100,000 into the share market, and the share market goes up by 10%, you've made 10 grand. So what that sort of means is that while they both go up the same amount, because of the leverage, property has a greater likelihood of getting that growth. Obviously, you've got to buy a good property, because there are some properties that haven't gone up, but it has that greater likelihood as long-term growth because of the leverage associated with it. Now, share have growth and they go up at the same amount and everything like that. It's just that you're not leveraging into it. Where we look at then, property is a long-term investment. So, and the reason I say that is because of that cost associated with getting in and getting out. So it's a growth asset that you look for long term. The other reason I look at it as a growth asset for long term is you can't break off a bathroom to send your kids to school, to private schools, or to go on a holiday or anything like that. So you don't want to buy an investment property just for the things that you need in the short and medium term, because you have to sell the whole property in order to do that. Whereas the share market, if you wanted to put away money for your kids' schooling, you can actually just sell a portion of shares, and you're able to actually pay for the school fees or go on that holiday or anything along that lines. The other thing is income. So I'm just going to recap because I've said a lot there. If I look at property, I see it as a growth asset over an income asset, and we're going to explain why, but I also see it as a growth asset because of that leverage. It's a long term because it's a slow moving elephant. So the cycles take longer to get from the growing phase to the peak phase to the downturn phase and to start again. And the reason for that is to do with the costs associated with getting in and out. Shares, on the other hand, have a greater volatility. And the reasons for that is you can get in and out very quickly. And it also, the cost to get in and out is a lot cheaper. If we then looked at income as a thought process between property and shares, even if you had paid off the mortgage on an investment property, the income generated at, say, 4.5% yield, right? You have a lot more costs associated. So you have water, you have rates, you have maintenance, and you have property fees. So if we take into consideration all of those costs, you're now down to a yield of around 5.5% in comparison to the share market, which generally gives you a yield of around 3.5 up to 6%, excluding franking credits, and there's no costs associated with that. You don't have to pay NAB to repaint their offices, or if their toilet breaks down. Whereas in your investment property, you do have to pay for those things. So where the share market can really shine is in that income generating asset, and also that ability to sell quickly and utilize it for short and medium term goals.
So it's not such a crazy lunatic after all.
No. It's still crazy, but it just does it differently. So I utilize them with my clients depending on their goals. So I still want medium to long term for the share market, but if I need it for school fees, I would use that strategy over a property because I can't sell a bathroom. And property is never going to give me an income that I need, regardless of how big your portfolio is. And I know there's a lot of people who spruik $1 million portfolios with incomes that you can retire on or whatever it is. I've done the math so many times. It's just not true. But the share market can give you an income purely because of the costs associated are just not there.
So with that, we've talked about property versus shares, and we've put superannuation into a different bucket again. So why are we going to love super now? I know we talked about this just before we got on, because I said, when I went full time, one of the very first things I initiated was adding to my super because, I want to see that nice and chunky.
Yeah.
But I know that was my own financial goal. Why should everyone else love their super?
So super is really just a vehicle that is probably the greatest tax dodge you can do, putting it simply, because all it does is keep your money in a tax effective environment in comparison to outside super. But the downside is you can't touch it until you retire. But and when I say tax dodge, basically you get a tax deduction for putting money into super. So right now, for example, we've got a couple of days left in the end of financial year. You can top up your super and get a tax deduction to do so. This is not giving advice. I just want to be very clear. We're going to put some sort of disclosure at the front of this, aren't we? So basically the reason why you should love super is inside super, you only pay 15% tax on any income earned, and 10% capital gains on any gains made if you hold it for over 12 months. Outside super, any income you earn on an investment, you pay at your marginal tax bracket. So say you're on $100,000 and then you had an income from an investment of 10 grand, your income now is 110. And then you pay tax on that 10,000 at your marginal tax bracket. Whereas inside super, you just pay 15% tax on that. Okay. The next reason why, and then how capital gains work is, just say you had an investment property and you sold that investment property and you made $100,000. If you held that investment property for over 12 months, 50% of that investment goes into your pocket. So $50,000 you don't pay any tax on. And the other $50,000 goes on your income, and you pay it at your marginal tax bracket. So if we use that example of $100,000, then that your income now is $150,000, and you pay tax on that $50,000 at that tax bracket. Inside super, it's 10%. So
Right.
that's the reason why super is really quite a magical thing, is it's just that tax, that benefit that you get from tax on the income or the capital gains is significantly lower than what you pay outside super. The other thing that's really great about super is the power of compounding. So this is one of the eighth wonders of the world, and it is just extraordinary what compounding will do. So, and it's one of the cool things that when super was invented in Australia, what made it so good is that if you start work at, say, 15 and you're every week or pay getting money put into super, in the beginning, it doesn't even make any sense. If the market goes up by 10%, you've made $5. Right? But that compounding effect over time means that money will turn into something quite extraordinary when you get to retirement. And it's that long-term planning that is so beneficial for you, especially if you want to retire. So if we then think about super and we go, okay, it's great from a tax point of view, it's invested for the long term and I can't touch it. I get a tax deduction if I put more money into it. What other benefits are there? So, and how can I utilize this more, I suppose, is the question that comes to a lot of people's mind then. So at the moment, you can put, your employer has to put 11% of your income into super. That on the 1st of July, that goes up to 11.5. So that's huge. The other thing is that per year as a tax deduction, you can put $27,500. And again, on the 1st of July, that goes up to $30,000. So that in itself means that you can put more into super as a tax deduction. So if you were on $100,000 and you put 30, and including super, and you put $30,000 into super, that brings your marginal tax bracket down to $70,000. That's how it works as a tax deduction. And I'm just using ease of maths so that everybody understands, plus I can understand and explain it better. So that's the benefit of how the tax deduction works. It basically brings your marginal tax bracket down to how much you've put in. Okay. Then there's these other cool things that have been invented that a lot of people don't know about. And one of them is this catch-up rule. So it's a rolling 5-year catch-up where you can catch up all of those super that you haven't put in over the last 5 years. So if I just make this as simple as possible to explain without a whiteboard, what I mean by that is in the 18-19 financial year, you were allowed to put $25,000 as a tax deduction into super. And then the next year it was 25,000. And then the following year, I think it went up to 27,500, etc. So what that basically means is that if you only put 10 grand per year into super over the last 5 years, you can actually catch up everything you've missed or were allowed to do, and it will be a tax deduction. Now, one of the key rules, because it's really important, is you first have to catch up the year you're in. So what I mean by that is this year, it's 27,500. So first of all, you have to put in 27,500 this year, and then anything over that 27,500 goes to the 18-19 year, and then the 19-20 financial year, and so on and so forth. The second rule is you have to have a super balance of under 500. Okay, in the previous year. So if you're getting towards that $500,000, the best thing you can do is to actually look at this and see whether you've maxed out your super and utilize these things. When I say it's a rolling 5-year, what that means is next financial year, the 18-19 will disappear.
Yeah.
You won't be able to catch that up. Okay, so with clients, I've got and you don't have to do it all in 1 year. So with clients, what I'm doing is we slowly catch up all the years over a 3-year period to make sure we don't miss out on any of those things. How you find out what your catch up is you go into MyGov. And since COVID, we all have a MyGov and we all know how to do it. We all know our login because we have to. So you go into MyGov and you go to the tax area. And then you go to your super, and then there'll be a section called contributions, and you'll be able to actually see how many contributions you've made in your super over the last 5 years. We'll break it down per year, and also then it will also be able to tell you how much you have available to catch up. So it will actually give you this information. And then what you can do is you can go, okay, so I have $20,000 to catch up. If I put it in this year, right? If I put that $20,000 in this year, that means I'll get a tax deduction this year, or I can put it in next year. It just depends, right? But how you do that is really important as well. So you have to go to your super fund and find out how to put it in as a personal contribution, first of all. And then you have to complete a form called a notice of intent to claim. You have to complete that form and you have to send it to your super fund. And then you get a tax deduction. So when you go to do your tax return, the government will already know, because as soon as you put that in, the super fund does their little changes in their area, and then they go and it goes straight to the ATO, and the ATO knows when you do your tax return. And if they don't know, send them the notice of intent to claim when you do your tax return. So when I look at investing as a whole, I look at property as a really cool long-term growth asset. I look at the share market as an amazing long-term growth asset, but also that ability to give you an income.
Yeah.
Then I look at super, and I just look at it as it's property or shares. It doesn't really matter what's in there. I look at it more as an amazing place to hold your assets that is the most tax effective you can do. And if we just go back a little bit, because I do like super, if we just go back a little bit about it, I said that when you're working, you pay 15% tax on any income earned and 10% on any capital gains made, right? So that's pretty cool in itself, because outside super, as long as you're earning above 20 grand, you're going to pay more than 15% income tax. When you retire, you can have up to $1.9 million in super, which then converts to pension. It's just a different name for your super fund, and pay no tax on any income earned or any capital gains made. So that in itself is just absolutely extraordinary. So if we think about that and go, oh my God, I can have up to $1.9 million. And if you have a partner, that's $1.9 million each. Because some people think it's a combined, but it's not. It's per person, and you pay no tax on any income earned or any capital gains made. Now, okay, people then turn around and they say to me, but the government has already made so many changes. Why would I believe that you should put money into super? What happens if they make more changes? I don't think it's a good idea. I hear all of this all the time, and I'm here to tell you that they are definitely going to make changes. There is no ifs or buts about it. There is over, I don't know, I think it's like $3 or $4 trillion in the super funds at the moment. So they are definitely going to make changes to try and actually earn more income off that. But they're never going to make it worse than investing outside. Because, and I know this, even though I don't work in the government and I have no affiliation with the government, but it would never make any logical sense. And the reason being is they don't want you on the age pension. The government age pension costs them an absolute fortune. They want you to be self-funded retirees because then they don't have to give you money. And the only way they can convince you to be a self-funded retiree is to make super more attractive than investing outside super. And in turn, then it means that people will actually put money into it. So I guarantee you, between when you and I retire, there will be more changes, but it will never be as bad as investing outside super. And when I say bad, I mean just taxable outside super. One of the things they've got going on at the moment is if you have over $3 million in a combination of pension and super per person, right? So they're going to put an extra tax on this. That's just part and parcel of life. It's the idea for super is for it to be for retirement, and it's not for inheritance. It's for you to live on comfortably in retirement. And so, yes, that's probably going to happen. It hasn't gone through. It hasn't been approved yet. But when it does, there'll be strategies to mitigate that as much as possible. But at the end of the day, if you have $1.9 million in pension paying no tax, you're going to have a pretty good life.
Yeah.
So you're going to be okay.
A lot less worry. Yeah.
I love super. So then, okay, so I'm going to recap because I want to make sure everybody understands all the steps. First of all, we make amazing investors. Okay, 0.4% outperform our male counterparts. Now that's huge. That is a massive amount when we take into consideration compounding. And it flips it on our head. Most people think that males are better investors when in actual fact we are better. So this is great news. So then what we need to do is we need to understand where we are now. Okay, we need to understand our net asset position. Then we need to understand where we want to go. So we want to then look at what our goals are. Do we want to buy a home? Do we want to pay our debt? Do we want to retire early? Do we want to go on holidays? What are all those things? Then we go, okay, how much are those things going to cost? Okay. Then we look at our surplus. We all need a surplus. So if you don't have a surplus, you need to then reevaluate what you're spending your money on. And we're going to put that surplus in the different assets in order to achieve those goals. And that will be that can be a combination of super for retirement, investing outside super in either the shares or the property market, or investing inside super in either shares or property. And it just all depends on what you're trying to achieve and your time frame to achieve it. So, yeah.
So why do you think it's, the women are doing so well, and, we're starting to really, in all of history, women are actually only just starting to find their feet now when it comes to finances. So why do you think it's important for them to invest in and grow their financial wealth?
Well, there's a heap of reasons. First of all, being financially independent, I think, is important for everybody. So I just think that as a person, an adult who is working, whether you're a woman or a man or gender neutral, it is really, really important for you to actually be financially independent and have a clear understanding of how your finances personally work. There's still a pay gap. Now, there's different ways you can cut this pay gap, but the workplace gender equality says that the pay gap is sitting at 21.7%. And I don't want to go into all the details of why that's different to the other pay gap we've heard. But that pay gap basically means that we actually, in our lifetime, earn less than our male counterparts. And One of the reasons we do that happens is because we take time out for having children. We may return to work part-time. We may need to take time out to look after elderly family, our parents. And so in turn, if we take all of those things into consideration, we're just not at pay parity yet. And so we need to actually look after our investments and our wealth and have that understanding, because we as a whole don't earn as much as men. The other reason is a man isn't a financial plan. When you think about at the moment, there are more single women than married, and that's going to continue. And that's due to a number of things: choice, not wanting to get married, divorce, and death. And so in turn, we need to actually look after our finances, because we don't necessarily have someone that's going to look after it for us. And if there is more single women than married, then that's just facts, isn't it? We outstrip men in uni and school. I've already mentioned that with regards to our education outperformance, right? But on average, women graduates earn 4.8% less in that first year out than our male counterparts. And so if we're already on the back foot there, making sure that we're consciously looking after our financial situation is another reason why it's really important to do so. If I can just touch on this, because I think this is a really important thing for any of our listeners to be thinking about here, especially if you've got daughters at university now, or had just about to graduate. We need to discuss negotiations. I've gone through this as a director and hiring someone. We had a male come out of their degree who was perfect for our company, and we were going to hire him. And we had a female graduate come out and had the exact same qualifications, the exact same personality in regards to being personable and perfect for eventually becoming a financial advisor. When we offered the male the job, we gave him an income, and he said, "Thank you very much." He then came back to us the next day and he asked for more. And we were like, "Oh, okay." That's interesting. In turn, we offered him some education. Like we said, we'd pay for some education or any growth that he wanted to do. And he said, "I've actually done quite a lot of education, so I would actually just prefer to be paid more." Now, that in itself is huge. What that guy did was he went back to his mates and he said, "I've been offered this job. How cool is that?" And one of his friends said, "Well, listen, I got offered this amount, so maybe you should ask for more." So he did. And so I think this is really important for anybody listening to talk to their daughters about money. It's really important for us to talk about money, to talk about investing, to talk about valuing what you're worth, and also this negotiation skill. When you're offered a job and you're offered the pay, there is no harm in saying, is there a possibility for us to be negotiated? Can I ask for more money?
Yeah.
And then that gap of 4.8% will reduce slowly over time, because we just need to learn the importance of negotiations.
And, understand that, your time is valuable.
Yeah.
Make sure you earn it,
Yeah.
Like, brilliant. Well, as expected, we've had a great chat. And I always take away something from you. And actually, I have a new favorite saying after listening to you today.
Yep.
And that is now, a man isn't a financial plan. I think I'm going to use that for my daughter as she grows up, so she can be aware of her own independence. So new favorite quote right there.
How old's your daughter, Leanne?
She's 9.
Excellent. This is a perfect time. So one of the other things I talk about, like, is not only is it really, really important for women as a whole to look after their financial wealth and well-being, it also is really important as a household to talk about money to their kids and for them to learn, because we don't learn it at school at all. So one of the things that really works well is talking about how you're going to save for your next holiday with your kids. So as an example, you have made a decision that you want to go on a really big family holiday in 2 years' time, okay? And you've worked and you can choose to either go, I don't know, to Japan skiing, or to I don't know, Europe for a week. Now you've worked out the different costs associated with going to Japan versus going to Europe, and then you discuss that with your family and say, okay, Japan is going to cost us $20,000, Europe is going to cost us, I don't know, $30,000. In order for us to save for this, we need to put aside this amount of money. Which one do you want to go to? And then you're talking to them about how you actually go on a holiday. How do you afford to go on a holiday? And you're giving them this understanding of saving, spending less than you earn and investing the rest, or saving the rest. And they start to have this really cool education. You can do this when you're going out shopping and your daughter, as an example, wants to buy something. And rather than using the words, we can't afford it, using the words, we're actually saving for that cool holiday. Remember, we're going to put money in this cool holiday that we're going to go on. So we're not going to buy that toy, and explain that there is this choice that you have to make between buying a toy now or going on a holiday, and being able to explain that to them. So what I really think is important is not only as women do we need to start educating ourselves and understanding this better, we also need to pass this information down to our children so that they can actually understand this as well. One of the coolest thing that's happened, one of the coolest thing that's happened over the last, like, I don't know, a couple of years is the workshops I run now. I'm seeing more and more women actually coming to them being more financially literate in the first place. And this is just another thing they're learning, a little bit extra to learn. And that is fantastic. And it's obviously means that it's reflected in our ability to make more money. So it's cool.
And I love hearing that so much, because, you know, especially when we see this age of social media coming out, and people have this very loud voice that the school should be teaching this and that about finances. And the truth is that sometimes it's just a very simple conversation at home. We used it with my son. You know, he wanted quite an expensive gaming headset.
Yeah.
And he decided that he could either get presents, or if everyone actually put in money, he would get this really cool gaming headset. Took him 2 years to save for it, but he made sure he did it on his own. So it was the power of the wait.
Yeah.
We called it, because when you're willing to wait, you can get the bigger things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just that constant discussion about we want to do this, so therefore we're making a choice not to do that. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Anyone who's looking for a private wealth architect can find Kate on the Business Women Australia website page, which has all of your details and your contacts, and also readily available on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And we look forward, because we'll be hosting some events with Katie soon this year as well. So keep an eye out for those.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Leanne. It's been excellent. I generally find it easier if I have a whiteboard and a presentation. So hopefully everybody was able to understand all the different elements that makes up looking after your financial wealth and well-being. And I look forward to other events with BWA in the future.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.